There are a myriad of reasons. There's so many reasons why people choose to go this route, conducting FGM performing FGM or female genital mutilation on females. And it's sad because some of these reasons are totally absurd. So we have cases where we relate FGM to culture. Okay. Culture is one of the major reasons, tradition, whereby in some societies you find out that it is a passage of rights. And it shows that a woman has come to be of age. She is now a woman, and for her to be completely or totally recognized as being a woman, she now has to go through that right. And in doing so, she is recognized and given some level of status in the community. And this is often done by fellow women. So oftentimes it is more like this is a tradition that has been on ground for a very long time within such communities, and then they continue to practice it. And even in the case where the victim is not necessarily interested, but because it's a rite of passage, it happens. So that's the cultural aspect of it. You also have the socio-economic aspect of it, whereby you have young women that want to get married. Not necessarily because they are interested in being caught, but because it is part of the requirement. So a man might say, I will not marry you unless you are circumcised. And then this tradition is upheld by the family, especially the mothers of the mother-in-law specifically, and say, if you're not circumcised, you will not come into our family, because this is exactly what we do, and this is recognized as part of our tradition. Then you also have the case whereby it is more of a religious issue. And while no religion has actually promoted or supported this, you have various factions of religion. So in the Christendom, you have various faiths. And some faiths will tell you that this is what is allowed based on our understanding of the Bible. In Islam, even though Islam condemns mutilation of the body, even Christianity condemns that. Christianity does not even allow all those things. But you find some people that can actually, quote some verses and tell you that are misinterpreted. And so this is something that is carried on. And you know how culture is, and you know how society is. We tend to listen to our religious leaders a lot. And then
so
we give
even
a lot of,
without specific or scientific or even social cultural,
nothing backs it up. There are no facts that FGM does not favor the woman in any way. There is no research that has shown that FGM is good for a woman. There is no research that has shown that women benefit anything from it. In fact, in retro, if you look at it, it actually is very harmful to the woman, both to her psychology, to her well-being. It is not in any way recommended, but it has been ongoing for a very long time, and sometimes it is hushed even amongst us.
Yeah, and it's difficult as a part of human culture, something that predates you.
Exactly.
It becomes you're seen as sort of a renegade when you try to bring up a campaign to say this is wrong. So is it safe to say, Claire, that female genital mutilation is in some way a surreptitious attempt at ensuring gender inequality?
Absolutely. I think to a very large extent it is about control. Control, because the female has always been in a position whereby they are dominated by men from time immemorial. Gender inequality has been deeply entrenched in our society from time immemorial. We know that to a very large extent a woman should not be seen. She's only supposed to be heard, or how do they put that?
But of course, women like you are changing that narrative. And
we're trying to change that narrative. And sadly, sometimes you find out that the custodians of this culture are women. You can't blame some of them, but again, some of them have actually heard about the dangers, but they still choose to continue the practice. And it's sad again, because sometimes when even cases of severe cases or fatal cases of death or bleeding, hemorrhage and all of that occurs, you would expect that, oh, this is actually dangerous and society should actually condemn and put a stop to it. But in cases like that, another story comes in and they say, oh, it's one of the gods permitted it, and that's why this person died. Or there's always a cultural background. And so it's often difficult to change the mindsets of people around issues like this. But again, progress has been made. At some point in time in 2012, when the government of Goodluck Jonathan banned FGM and all practices, we found out that there was actually a decline. Because between between a certain period up to 2012, we found out that 27% of women have actually been affected by FGM in Nigeria. But to a very large extent now, we find out that it is actually declining. The figures are going down, and it's only now been sectionalized to certain parts of the country.
Okay.
Unlike before, where you could hear that it's almost across every part of the country. But in this case, it's prevalent in some areas, but in other cases, you find out that the rate at which that is even happening in such localities
is going down. That's great to know. Okay, we're going to go on a quick break. When we return, we'll look at the medical and psychological effects of female genital mutilation on the girl child. Don't go away. The Well Child Show will be right back. Welcome to the Well Child Show. You're welcome back. It's still the Well Child Show, and I'm Kemak Onyenuchea, your host. If you're just joining me, I have in the studio Mrs. Clare Henshaw, social development consultant and an advocate for the rights of the girl child. And the topic of the day is female genital mutilation. Yes, Claire, before we went on the break, we were talking about the health and sundry implications of female genital mutilation on the girl child. And I know you mentioned that a woman that was made to go through female genital mutilation as she grows has certain issues, negative issues that surround that experience that she had. And just before the show, someone in the studio mentioned the effect that had on her mother as a 16-year-old that was made to go through female genital mutilation. So can you enlighten our guests a bit on some of the consequences, emotional, psychological, and so forth?
Absolutely. You know, in this part of the world, we actually take the issue of trauma and mental health not too seriously, and we tend to forget that as one grows, depression sets in and all of that. So let's start with the mental state of the person that has gone through FGM. You find that women or young girls that have gone through FGM, as they actually find it difficult to trust people, both within their communities, both within their families. They have this feeling of, how could I have been the person that could have gone through this? How can I survive this? And there's this misconception that FGM, reduces promiscuity in girls. That has not been proven in any way. So you find young girls or even women within this group having difficulty enjoying sexual intercourse, even in their marriages or in their relationships, and then they can't forge or move ahead from that deep or depressing situation that they have been through. Again, you find that women that have gone through FGM, they usually have complications during childbirth, because to a very large extent, depending on the kind of procedure that has been carried out on her, if it's the extreme case where you have the vaginal fusing, it means that during intercourse, the pain is extremely painful. And usually this pain is actually associated for the pleasure of men and not necessarily for her own pleasure. And then you also find out that during childbirth, a woman or a young lady in that situation has to be, caught. Again, despite the trauma of having to go through childbirth, you now still have to go through the trauma of, being caught to ensure that your child comes out alive.